My name is Major Lily Kemp. I am 33 years old. I hold a Yankee White security clearance, meaning I am trusted to protect the darkest, most critical secrets of this nation. Yet, for all my training and authority, I found myself unable to protect my own heart from my father. It happened late that afternoon at the Quantico security checkpoint. My father, a retired master sergeant, laughed in the face of the young military police officer on duty. He pointed a grease-stained finger at me while I sat in the driver's seat wearing my dress blues, the most formal and sacred uniform of the Marine Corps. "Don't mind her, son," he sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. "She's just a civilian in a costume, just playing dress-up. Open the gate for me." A deathly silence suffocated the air inside the car. He honestly thought his tattered, expired retiree ID card was the ultimate authority. He believed his past glory outweighed my present reality. He had no idea that his arrogance had just triggered a security protocol that was about to tear his fragile ego apart forever. When the red sirens began to wail and the scanner screen flashed the words, "Yankee White, Priority 1," the arrogant smirk on my father's lips vanished instantly. That was the moment the most brutal truth of his life began to unfold. If you have ever been underestimated by your own parents, if your achievements have been dismissed simply because you didn't follow the path they dictated, type "understood" in the comments and subscribe. This story is your vindication. The humiliation at the gate didn't happen in a vacuum. It started 2 days earlier, in the sticky, syrup-scented booth of a Waffle House off I-95. I had stood before the full-length mirror in my hallway for 20 minutes that evening. I meticulously adjusted the Mameluke sword at my hip, ensuring the intricate hilt was perfectly aligned. I brushed a microscopic speck of lint from the midnight blue fabric of my dress blues. The high collar was stiff against my neck, forcing my chin up, forcing a posture of dignity. The gold oak leaves on my shoulders, the insignia of a major, caught the light. Today was my father's 60th birthday. I wanted him to see me. Really see me. Not as Lily, the little girl who scraped her knees, but as Major Kemp, a woman who commanded respect in the halls of the Pentagon. I had made reservations at a high-end steakhouse in D.C., a place with white tablecloths and hushed tones, somewhere worthy of a milestone celebration. But an hour before dinner, my phone buzzed. A text from Frank. "Cancel the fancy place. Too stiff. Meet me at the Waffle House on Route 1. That's where the real food is." I had sighed, the sound loud in my empty apartment. I drove my government-issued black SUV to the diner, the tires crunching over gravel and trash in the parking lot. Stepping inside, I felt like an alien. The diner was a cacophony of clattering silverware, sizzling grease, and loud conversations. The air was thick with the smell of bacon fat and cheap coffee. I walked to a booth in the back, my polished shoes clicking sharply on the linoleum. Heads turned. Truckers in flannel and construction workers in neon vests stared. A Marine in dress blues is a sight usually reserved for balls or funerals, not for ordering hash browns at 7 p.m. I sat down, keeping my back straight, my hands folded on the sticky table, waiting. Frank arrived 20 minutes late. He didn't apologize. He pushed open the glass door, bringing a gust of humid Virginia air with him. He was wearing an old, faded red t-shirt with the USMC Bulldog print cracking across the chest. His jeans were stained with motor oil, and as he slid into the booth opposite me, I saw the grime embedded deep under his fingernails. He didn't look me in the eye. He didn't say, "Happy to see you," or "You look sharp." He grabbed a laminated menu, squinted at it, and then finally glanced at my chest. "That coat is too tight, Lily," he said, his voice loud enough for the next table to hear. "You look like one of those B-movie actors. You know, the ones who play soldiers but hold the gun wrong." He chuckled dryly, a sound that grated against my nerves. "Hey!" he shouted at a passing waitress, not even checking to see if she was ours. "Get me an all-star special. Scramble the eggs hard, and keep the coffee coming." He didn't ask me what I wanted. He didn't ask how my drive was. He just assumed his presence was the gift. A young waitress approached our table a moment later with a coffee pot. She looked tired, maybe a college student working a double shift. As she poured, her eyes widened when she saw my shoulder boards. She stopped, the pot hovering in midair. "Oh, wow," she breathed, a genuine smile breaking through her exhaustion. "Ma'am, are you a major?" "My brother is in boot camp right now." She stood a little straighter. "Thank you for your service, ma'am. We actually have a policy here. Officers get a discount on the—" Slam. Frank's hand hit the Formica table with the force of a hammer. The silverware jumped. The coffee in my cup sloshed over the rim. "Don't bother, sweetheart," Frank barked, cutting her off. His voice was a weapon, sharp and jagged. The waitress flinched, pulling the coffee pot back as if she'd been burned. "Sir?" Frank pointed a fork at me, waving it dismissively like he was shooing away a fly. "Don't let the costume fool you. She's just a secretary in a flashy outfit. She pushes papers around a desk in the air conditioning. She's never held a real rifle in a combat zone in her life. She's civilian management." He looked at me with a smirk that didn't reach his cold eyes. "Charge her full price. She makes enough taxpayer money doing nothing." The silence that followed was absolute. The hum of the refrigerator seemed to get louder. The waitress turned bright red, her eyes darting between my gold oak leaves and my father's aggressive glare. At the booth behind us, a group of 3 older men, veterans, judging by their caps, snickered. I heard one of them mutter, "Desk jockey." My face felt like it was on fire. The heat rushed up my neck, burning under the stiff collar of my uniform. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and flip the table. I wanted to tell him that just last week, I led a cyber defense operation that protected the navigation systems of the entire 7th Fleet in the Pacific. I wanted to tell him that while I didn't crawl through mud with a bayonet, my decisions kept thousands of Marines alive. But I froze. I reverted to my training. I heard the voice of General James Mattis in my head, a quote I had memorized during officer candidate school. "Be polite, be professional, but have a plan to kill everybody you meet." In this moment, the person I had to kill was the part of me that craved his approval. I had to kill the little girl who just wanted her dad to be proud. I slowly moved my hands under the table. I clenched my fists so hard that my manicured nails dug into my palms, breaking the skin. The pain was grounding. It was a tether to reality. I looked up at the mortified waitress. I didn't look at Frank. I forced the corners of my mouth up into a polite, frozen smile. "Just black coffee for me, please," I said. My voice was steady, eerie in its calmness. "Thank you." The waitress hurried away, clearly eager to escape the blast radius of our table. Frank snorted, satisfied. He dug into his eggs and bacon the moment they arrived, chewing with his mouth open, grease shining on his chin. He ate with the gusto of a man who believed he had just won a battle. He thought he had put me in my place. He thought he had reminded everyone within earshot of the natural order. He was the warrior. I was the pretender. He didn't know it yet. But as I watched him wipe egg yolk from his lip with the back of his dirty hand, something inside me shifted. The bridge between us cracked. He thought this was just banter. He didn't realize that he had just fired the first shot in a war he was destined to lose. Rain lashed against the windshield of my SUV as I drove home from the Waffle House, the rhythmic thumping of the wipers matching the dull ache in my chest. The humiliation of the dinner still clung to me like the smell of stale grease. But as the miles blurred past on I-95, my mind drifted back to where this Cold War truly began. It wasn't always like this. Or maybe it was, and I just hadn't wanted to see it. 10 years ago. Quantico, Virginia. I could still feel the biting cold of that December morning. It was the day I graduated from Officer Candidate School, OCS. For 10 grueling weeks, I had pushed my body and mind past the breaking point. I had low-crawled through freezing mud, navigated dense forests with nothing but a compass, and endured the screaming of sergeant instructors until my voice was gone. I didn't just survive, I thrived. I graduated at the top of my class, standing on the parade deck, the rain soaking through my uniform just like it was soaking my car now. I raised my right hand to take the oath. I, Lily Kemp, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States. The pride I felt in that moment was incandescent. It burned brighter than the cold. I was no longer just Lily. I was a second lieutenant in the United States Marine Corps. As the ceremony ended and the formation was dismissed, I scanned the crowd of families huddled under umbrellas. I was looking for one face, just one. And then I saw him. My father stood apart from the other cheering parents. He was wearing his old field jacket, arms crossed tight over his chest, his face carved from granite. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't clapping. He was a master sergeant, an E8. He had spent 22 years climbing the enlisted ranks, earning his stripes through blood and sweat in conflicts most people had forgotten. He was part of the old Corps, the backbone of the service, and on that day, his 22-year-old daughter had just become an O1. Technically, by the rigid hierarchy of military rank, I was now his superior officer. I ran over to him, my boots splashing in the puddles, desperate for approval. "Dad!" I breathless, grinning like an idiot. "I did it! I'm a lieutenant!" I waited for the hug. I waited for the "good job, Marine." I waited for the validation I had been chasing my entire life. Instead, he looked me up and down, his eyes cold and assessing. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, wrapped box. "Here," he grunted, shoving it into my hand. My heart leaped. A gift? Maybe a watch? A compass? Something to signify passing the torch? I tore off the paper. Inside lay a single, cheap, blue Bic ballpoint pen. The kind you buy in a pack of 10 for $1 at the commissary. I looked up at him, confused. "A pen?" He leaned in close, the smell of tobacco on his breath. "Take it," he said, his voice low and mocking. "That's your weapon now. Don't go getting ink on any real soldiers, you hear?" The words hit me harder than any physical blow. The smile slid off my face. "You're an officer now, Lily," he continued, spitting the word officer like it was a curse. "You're management. You sit in the air conditioning while men like me do the dying. Don't forget that." He had drawn a line in the sand that day. On one side were the real Marines, the enlisted grunts, the mudsloggers, the ones with dirt under their nails. On the other side were the officers, the cake eaters, the paper pushers, the ones he despised. And I was now the enemy. Over the next decade, that divide only widened. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every family reunion became a battlefield of passive-aggressive comments. I would come home with news of a promotion or a commendation medal or a successful deployment. Frank would listen, stone-faced, and then immediately turn to my cousin Billy. Billy was 30 years old, drank a 12-pack of beer before noon, and worked sporadically as a plumber's apprentice when he wasn't hungover. But to Frank, Billy was a hero. "Now Billy here," Frank would boom, clapping my cousin on the back. "Billy knows what real work is. Look at those hands. Calloused. Dirty. That's a man who builds America, unlike some people who just push buttons in a climate-controlled office." Billy would grin, showing yellow teeth, and toast with his beer can. "Hell yeah, Uncle Frank. Real work." I tried to buy Frank's affection. When his old truck broke down, I bought him a new transmission. He told the neighbors he fixed it himself. When I offered to pay off his mortgage, he threw the check back in my face, accusing me of trying to buy him off with my easy money. He couldn't stand that I had succeeded in a world he felt he owned, but in a way he couldn't respect. He was jealous. It was an ugly, bitter truth, but there it was. He was jealous that his little girl outranked him. I pulled my car into the garage of my apartment complex in Arlington. The silence of my empty apartment greeted me. No husband, no kids, just the quiet hum of the HVAC system. I walked into my home office and switched on the lamp. The light fell on the framed document hanging above my desk. It was my Yankee white clearance certificate, stamped with the highest seals of the Department of Defense. To the world, this paper meant I was one of the most trusted individuals in the nation. It was a golden ticket that allowed me to walk into the Oval Office. It was proof of impeccable character, unwavering loyalty, and supreme competence. To my father, it was just another piece of paper for a desk jockey. I sank into my leather chair, feeling the exhaustion deep in my bones. I opened the drawer and pulled out my old Bible, the one my mother had given me before she passed. It fell open to a page I'd bookmarked long ago. Matthew 13:57. A prophet is not without honor except in his own town and in his own home. I traced the words with my finger. Why was it that strangers, like the waitress tonight or the colonel at work, could see my worth, could respect the uniform and the sacrifice it represented? Why did complete strangers thank me for my service, while my own father looked at me with nothing but disdain? It's a lonely feeling, realizing that the people who are supposed to be your biggest cheerleaders are actually rooting for you to fail, just so they can feel better about themselves. If you've ever felt like the black sheep simply because you chose a different path to success, or if you know the pain of a parent's jealousy, hit that like button right now. And in the comments, just write, I am enough. Because you are. And I need to remind myself of that tonight too. I closed the Bible and looked back at the Yankee white certificate. The glass reflected my face, tired but set with a hard determination. Let him think I'm just a paper pusher. Let him think my pen is just a toy. Tomorrow I had a briefing at the White House. Tomorrow I would wield that pen to authorize security protocols that kept the leader of the free world alive. Frank might have his pride, but I had a job to do. And in this house, even if it was empty, that job mattered. 0800 hours. The Pentagon. I was standing deep underground in a SCIF, a sensitive compartmented information facility. There are no windows here, the air is recycled, cold, and smells faintly of ozone and burnt coffee. The only light comes from the massive wall of LED screens displaying real-time global threat matrices. To enter this room, I had to pass through 3 layers of biometric security, leave all personal electronics in a locker outside, and be vetted by the FBI so thoroughly they probably knew what I ate for breakfast in 3rd grade. On the main screen was the itinerary for POTUS, the President of the United States. He was scheduled to land in Brussels in 4 hours for a NATO summit. Major Kemp, a voice cut through the hum of the servers. I turned. It was Captain Evans, my lead intel analyst. Ma'am, we're picking up chatter on a dark web frequency, possible protest gathering near the motorcade route. Threat level low, but increasing. I didn't hesitate. Cross-reference with local assets. Reroute the secondary extraction team to Sector 4. I want eyes on every rooftop along that boulevard. If a bird so much as sneezes near the beast, I want to know about it. Copy that, ma'am. I stood at the center of the room, the conductor of a silent, deadly orchestra. 20 intelligence officers, the best of the best, were typing furiously at their stations, waiting for my commands. In here, I wasn't Frank Kemp's disappointment. I wasn't the girl who played dress-up. In here, I was God. Or as close to it as the government allowed. A moment later, the heavy steel door hissed open. An Air Force colonel walked in. A bird colonel, 06, 2 ranks above me. He was flanked by 2 aides. He scanned the room, saw me, and walked straight over. Major, he said, extending a hand. We need your sign-off on the no-fly zone adjustments for the arrival. The Secret Service is pushing back on the radius. I took the file he offered. I scanned the coordinates quickly, my brain processing the logistics of airspace, fuel loads, and response times in seconds. Tell the Secret Service that if they shrink the radius, they lose AWACS coverage, I said, looking the colonel in the eye. I won't authorize a blind spot. Keep it at 20 miles. I'll take the heat if the commercial airlines complain. The colonel nodded, respect evident in his eyes. Understood. Good call, Lily. He handed me a pen to sign the authorization. I didn't take it. Instead, I reached into my breast pocket and pulled out my own. A black resin Mont Blanc Meisterstück with gold trim. It was heavy, balanced, and precise. It cost more than my first car. As the ink flowed smoothly onto the paper, sealing the safety of the most powerful man on Earth, I couldn't help but think of the cheap blue Bic pen sitting in my junk drawer at home. This is my weapon, Dad, I thought bitterly, and it's a hell of a lot more powerful than a rifle. Thank you, Colonel, I said, handing the file back. Bravo, Zulu, Major, he replied, the naval signal for well done, before turning to leave. I took a deep breath, the adrenaline of command buzzing in my veins. For 2 hours, we were in the zone. We were saving the world, one decision at a time. Then, the red light above the door flashed. Shift change, mandatory 10-minute break for mental reset. I walked out of the CKIF, my shoulders stiff. I retrieved my personal phone from the secure locker in the hallway. It was vibrating. I looked at the screen. Dad. A knot of dread tightened in my stomach, instantly killing the high of my command. I hesitated, then answered. Major Kemp, I said, force of habit. Cut the crap, Lily. Frank's voice scratched through the speaker, tinny and annoyed. I've been calling you for 20 minutes. Where the hell have you been? I'm at work, Dad, I said, leaning against the cold concrete wall of the corridor. I can't have my phone inside. You know that. Yeah, secret squirrel stuff, he scoffed. Listen, the transmission on the truck is acting up again. It's making that grinding noise. I need to take it to the shop, but I'm short this month. I closed my eyes. How much? 500 ought to cover it. Maybe 6, just to be safe. Dad, I just sent you money for the mortgage last week. So? His voice rose, defensive and sharp. You think money grows on trees for me? I'm on a fixed income, Lily. I served this country for 22 years, and this is how they treat me. Meanwhile, you're sitting there in your fancy air-conditioned office, pushing pencils, making officer pay. You're sitting on a gold mine while your old man can't even drive to the grocery store. The injustice of it burned my throat. I am literally coordinating the safety of the president, I wanted to scream. I am exhausted. I haven't slept more than 4 hours a night in a week. Dad, I'm in the middle of a critical operation, I said, my voice tight. Can we talk about this later? Oh, sure, he sneered. Go back to your tea party. Go back to your meetings. Must be nice to get paid to talk. Just send the money, Lily. Don't be ungrateful. Remember who raised you. Ungrateful. The word hung in the air like smoke. I pulled the phone away from my ear. I opened my banking app. My fingers flew across the screen, not authorizing a drone strike or a security perimeter, but a Zelle transfer. Sent $600 to Frank Kemp. I sent it, Dad, I said quietly. About time, he grunted. No, thank you. No, love you. Just the click of the line going dead. I stood there in the hallway of the Pentagon, surrounded by the most powerful military machinery in history, feeling completely powerless. I was a major. I was a Yankee white clearance holder. I was a wolf in the SIF. But to Frank Kemp, I was just an ATM, a convenient, limitless resource that he could tap whenever he wanted, while simultaneously spitting on the very career that provided the money. I took a deep breath, forcing the emotions down, locking them into a box deep in my mind. I straightened my uniform. I put the phone back in the locker. I turned and walked back into the windowless room. The heavy steel door hissed shut behind me, sealing me back into the world where I mattered. But the crack in my armor was getting wider, and I knew deep down that $500 was a cheap price to pay for silence, but it wouldn't buy it for long. 2 days passed. The $600 I'd wired to my father sat in the digital ether between us, unacknowledged. No text, no thank you card. Just a silence that I had learned to interpret as transaction complete. I was sitting on my balcony on a humid Friday evening, nursing a glass of iced tea and trying to decompress from a 60-hour work week when my phone buzzed again. Dad. I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered over the decline button. I could just let it go to voicemail. I could claim I was in the shower, or asleep, or back in the SIF. But the conditioning ran deep. You answer the call. You report for duty. I slid the bar to accept. Hello, Dad. Lily, he started, his voice booming without preamble. What are you doing this Sunday? He didn't ask how I was. He didn't mention the money for the truck transmission. He just plowed forward with his agenda, as always. I'm catching up on rest, Dad, I said, rubbing my temples. It's been a long week. Well, wake up, he said. Old Mike Henderson is retiring. You remember Mike? He was my gunnery sergeant back in Okinawa. He's finally hanging up the uniform after 30 years. The ceremony is at the National Museum of the Marine Corps, right outside Quantico, but the reception, the real party, is at the officers' club on base. Okay, I said, wary. That sounds nice. Send Mike my regards. No, you don't get it, Frank said, impatient. I need you to drive me. I paused. You want me to drive you? Is your truck still broken? I sent you the money to fix it. The truck is fine, he dismissed quickly, too quickly. But my retiree ID is expired. I went to find it in my wallet yesterday, and the damn thing ran out 2 years ago. I tried to go online to renew it, but the website is a mess. Passwords, two-factor authentication, all that bureaucratic nonsense. I don't have time for it. He paused, waiting for me to connect the dots. When I didn't, he huffed. So, I need you to drive me onto the base, he commanded. You have your fancy active duty card. You can get us through the gate. I don't want to deal with the visitor control center. The line is always an hour long and full of civilians. My stomach tightened. Dad, it doesn't work like that anymore. Not since 9/11. Security at Quantico is tight. It's FP Con Bravo right now. If your ID is expired, they won't just wave you through because you're with me. I have to sponsor you. We still have to stop at the gate, and if their scanner flags your ID as invalid, they'll turn us around. Don't you lecture me about security, he snapped, his voice rising. I was a master sergeant when you were still in diapers. I helped build that damn base. I know the MPs at the gate. They're good boys. They see a veteran. They see the sticker on my truck. Or hell, they see me in the passenger seat. And they'll open the gate. It's called professional courtesy, something you officers don't understand. Professional courtesy. He was living in a fantasy world. He remembered a corps that ran on handshakes and knowing the right people. He refused to accept the reality of the modern military. A machine run by strict protocols, biometric scanners, and zero-tolerance policies. He thought he was above the rules because of who he used to be. Dad, I tried again, my voice firm. I'm telling you, if we roll up to the gate and you hand them an expired ID, it's going to be a problem. I can't just talk us in. I could lose my clearance if I try to bypass protocol. Oh, for God's sake, Lily, he shouted. Stop being such a coward. You're always so scared of the rules. Oh no, I might get in trouble. Grow a spine. I'm asking for a ride to a retirement party, not to break into Fort Knox. You just drive the car. Let me handle the talking. I'll tell them you're my daughter, and they'll respect that. They'll respect that. He truly believed that his rank, retired for a decade, still held more weight than my current active duty commission. He saw me not as a major in the United States Marine Corps, but as his chauffeur. A useful idiot with a valid ID card to facilitate his entry into the club. I was about to refuse. I was about to tell him to take an Uber to the visitor center and wait in line like everyone else. But then, a thought stopped me. He wouldn't listen to me. He never listened to me. I could explain force protection conditions until I was blue in the face, and he would just call me a paper pusher. The only way he would learn, the only way, was to see it for himself. He needed to hit the wall of reality. And if he crashed, well, maybe he needed the impact to wake him up. Fine, I said, my voice dropping to a cool, flat tone. I'll take you. Good, he grunted, satisfied that he had bullied me into submission. Pick me up at 0800, don't be late. Mike's speech starts at 0900 and I want to get a drink beforehand. I'll pick you up, I agreed. But Dad? When we get to the gate, you have to follow my lead. If the MP gives an order, you follow it. He laughed, a short barking sound. You follow my lead, Lily. I know how to handle sentries. Just keep your eyes on the road and let the men handle the business. See you Sunday, Dad. I hung up the phone and set it gently on the patio table. I picked up my iced tea, the condensation cold against my fingers. I looked out at the DC skyline in the distance. I thought about my ID card in my wallet, the common access card with the gold chip that identified me as a field-grade officer. I thought about the Yankee White designation in the DoD database. He wanted to go to Quantico. He wanted to show off to his old buddies. He wanted to play the big shot master sergeant one last time. Okay, Dad, I whispered to the empty air. You want to go to the base? I'll take you to the base, but you might not like what you find there. I took a sip of tea. It tasted bitter, but refreshing. Sunday was going to be a very interesting day. 0800 hours. Sunday morning. My black SUV idled in the driveway of my father's small clapboard house. The Virginia humidity was already rising, sticking my shirt to the leather seat. I watched the front door, my fingers tapping a nervous rhythm on the steering wheel. The door swung open, and Frank Kemp emerged. He was wearing a polo shirt tucked into khaki pants that had seen better days, and a VFW, Veterans of Foreign Wars, cap pulled low over his eyes. He didn't lock the door behind him. He just marched toward my car, looking like a general inspecting the troops. He yanked the passenger door open and hauled himself up into the seat with a grunt. The smell of Old Spice and stale tobacco instantly filled the cabin, overpowering my air freshener. "Morning, Dad," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. He didn't answer. He just looked around the interior of the car, his lip curling in a sneer. "Jesus, Lily, what is all this junk? Touchscreens, cameras, sensors. A car is supposed to be an engine and 4 wheels. You don't need a computer to drive down the road." "It's standard safety equipment, Dad," I said, putting the car in gear. "Safety," he scoffed. "Women drivers always need a computer to tell them how to park. That's why you bought a tank like this, isn't it? Because you're afraid of the road." I didn't take the bait. I merged onto the highway, heading south toward Quantico. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. He lifted his right leg and propped his foot up on my dashboard. His heavy work boot, the sole caked with dried red mud from his yard, rested directly on the pristine, beige leather. My jaw tightened. "Dad, get your foot down. You're getting mud on the dash." He looked at his foot, then at me, and laughed. "Relax, princess. It's just a little dirt. It wipes off. You treat this car better than you treat your own father." He didn't move his foot. I reached over, risking taking a hand off the wheel, and shoved his leg down. I said, "Get it down." He slapped my hand away. "Watch it. You almost swerved." He shook his head, looking out the window. "God, you're uptight. No wonder Jack left you. A man can't live with a woman who treats everything like a museum exhibit." The air left my lungs. Jack. Jack was a sore spot that hadn't healed in 3 years. My ex-fiancé who had walked out because he couldn't handle my deployment schedule. He had wanted a wife who was home for dinner every night, not one who disappeared into classified briefings for weeks at a time. "Jack didn't leave because of the car," I said, my voice icy. "He left because he was weak." "He left because you're unnatural," Frank countered, his voice dripping with venom. "Look at you, Lily. You're 33. When your mother was your age, she had 3 kids running around the yard. She had a home. She cooked dinner. You? You have a cat and a stack of paper awards that don't mean squat. What kind of legacy is that? A woman's place is building a family, not playing soldier." The words hit me like physical blows. Unnatural, empty, failure. I felt tears pricking the corners of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not in front of him, never in front of him. I reached for the radio dial and cranked the volume. George Strait's Amarillo. By morning flooded the cabin, loud enough to rattle the speakers. I needed to drown him out. I needed to drown out the voice that sounded suspiciously like my own insecurities. Frank glared at me. He reached over and snapped the radio off. The silence that rushed back in was deafening. "I am talking to you," he hissed. "Show some respect to your elders. I'm trying to help you. Someone has to tell you the truth, since you surround yourself with people who kiss your ass because of that rank on your shoulder." My knuckles were white on the steering wheel. I was shaking. "We're almost there," I said, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. Ahead of us, the tree line broke, revealing the imposing entrance to Marine Corps Base Quantico. Tall fences topped with razor wire stretched endlessly in both directions. Concrete barriers, designed to stop a truck bomb, formed a maze leading to the guard shacks. Seeing the base seemed to energize Frank. He sat up straighter, puffing out his chest. "All right," he said, shifting into command mode. "Listen to me. When we get up there, roll your window down, smile, big smile, show some teeth. Those young MPs, they've been standing in the sun for hours. They like a pretty face. Don't act all stiff and official. Dad, that's not how it works, I warned. Shut up and listen, he interrupted. I'll do the talking. I'll tell them I'm Master Sergeant Kemp. I'll tell them you're my daughter, giving me a lift. Just nod and look sweet. If they ask for ID, just fumble around in your purse until I wave them off. It's a psychological trick. Establish dominance, then offer friendship. We were getting closer. I could see the military police officer in the lane ahead. He wasn't smiling. He was wearing full tactical gear, body armor, helmet, drop-leg holster. A sleek black AR-15 rifle was slung across his chest. A German Shepherd K9 paced nervously on a leash held by a second officer. This wasn't the Mayberry that Frank remembered. This was a fortress. Dad, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Look at them. Look at the gear. This is FP Con Bravo. They are not here to flirt. They're Marines, Frank insisted, oblivious. We take care of our own. I slowed the car as we approached the yellow line. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. I knew what was coming. I knew, with the certainty of a train wreck, that he was about to humiliate himself. And me. I took a deep breath, reciting the words of Psalm 23 in my head to steady my nerves. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Dad, I said sharply. Silence. We are here. He turned to me, his eyes bulging with disbelief. Did you just give me an order? I said, be quiet, I whispered, bringing the car to a halt. Frank opened his mouth to scream at me, to assert his dominance one last time. But before he could, the MP stepped forward, his hand raised in a crisp, authoritative halt signal. I lowered the window. The humid air rushed in, carrying the scent of exhaust and tension. Frank leaned across the center console, invading my space, a grin plastered on his face that looked more like a snarl. Hey there, son, he boomed, ignoring my warning, ignoring the rifle, ignoring the reality of the world we lived in. How's the Corps treating you today? If you have ever been trapped in a car with a toxic parent who criticizes your life choices while you're doing them a favor, hit that like button. And in the comments type, my car, my rules, if you agree that boundaries are necessary. The MP didn't smile back. He didn't relax. His eyes scanned the interior of the car, cold and calculating, before locking onto Frank's face. The storm had arrived. The SUV rolled to a stop inches from the red and white striped barrier arm. Outside my window, the humidity was already suffocating, shimmering in waves off the asphalt. Sergeant Tyler, the military police officer, stepped out of the shade of the guard shack. He couldn't have been more than 25, lean and sharp, his eyes hidden behind polarized Oakley sunglasses. He moved with the practiced caution of someone who knew that a car could be a weapon. He raised a gloved hand, palm out. Stop! Frank leaned across the center console, practically sitting in my lap, shoving his face toward my open window. He flashed a grin that was all teeth and zero warmth, the kind of smile a shark gives before it bites. Morning, son, Frank bellowed, his voice booming over the hum of the engine. How are we doing today? Looking sharp in that gear. Sergeant Tyler didn't flinch. He didn't smile back. He stopped 2 feet from the door, keeping a tactical distance. Good morning, sir. Ma'am. His voice was flat, professional. Please state your business on base. Business? Frank laughed, a harsh barking sound. Pleasure mostly. Heading to the O Club for a retirement party. My old buddy Mike Henderson, Master Guns Henderson, you probably know him, is finally punching out. I'm Master Sergeant Frank Kemp, 1st Marine Division, retired. We're running a little late, so if you could just lift that gate, we'll be out of your hair. Frank sat back, crossing his arms, expecting the magic words, Master Sergeant, to dissolve the protocols like mist. Tyler didn't move toward the gate controls. Instead, he leaned in slightly. I need to see identification for all adult passengers, sir. Frank's smile faltered, just for a second, before turning into a grimace of annoyance. He fished a battered leather wallet from his back pocket, dug through a wad of receipts, and pulled out a blue ID card. The laminate was peeling at the corners. The photo faded to a ghostly gray. He thrust it toward the officer. Here, it's a little old, but the rank doesn't expire, right? Tyler took the card. He looked at the front, then flipped it over to check the expiration date on the back. He paused. He looked at Frank, then back at the card. Sir, Tyler said, his tone dropping a few degrees cooler. This ID expired 2 years ago. October 2021. Yeah, I know. Frank waved a dismissive hand. I've been meaning to get down to Deers to renew it, but you know how the bureaucracy is. Just do me a solid, son. Honor the service. Let us through. I'm good for it. Tyler handed the card back. I can't do that, sir. Base access requires valid, unexpired identification. Without a valid ID, you are unauthorized to enter. The air in the car instantly grew heavy. Frank's face turned a mottled shade of red, starting at his neck and creeping up to his ears. This was the moment he had dreaded. Not the rejection itself, but the rejection in front of me. Now listen here, Frank growled, his voice losing its fake friendliness. I served 22 years in this corps. I earned the right to walk on this ground. You're not going to turn me away over a piece of plastic. Those are the regulations, sir, Tyler said unbothered. If you don't have another form of valid DoD identification, you'll need to turn around. There's a U-turn lane right there. You can go to the Visitor Control Center and apply for a day pass. I am not going to the damn Visitor Center, Frank shouted, spit flying onto my dashboard. Do you know who I am? I was bleeding for this country while you were still swimming in your daddy's. He stopped himself, taking a ragged breath, then jabbed a finger aggressively toward me. Look, Frank snapped. The girl. She's with me. She's my daughter. She's got a valid card. She's vouching for me. Tyler looked at me. I sat frozen, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my face a mask of neutrality. I hadn't said a word yet. Ma'am? Tyler asked. Do you have your CAC? Before I could answer, Frank answered for me. She's just a civilian, Frank lied. She's just driving the car. She doesn't know the protocols. I'm the sponsor here. I'm telling you to open the gate. It was a lie so blatant, so desperate, it made my stomach churn. He would rather strip me of my rank, reduce me to a civilian driver, than admit he needed my help. He was trying to use my valid access while simultaneously denying my authority. Tyler's posture changed instantly. The boredom vanished. Sir, lower your voice, Tyler ordered. He took a step back, his right hand dropping instinctively to his waist. It didn't draw the weapon, but it rested on the grip of his Sig Sauer P320. The retention hood clicked. The sound was small, but in the silence of the standoff, it sounded like a gunshot. You are disrupting traffic and creating a disturbance, Tyler said, his voice loud and commanding now. You have been denied access. Turn the vehicle around immediately. Frank looked at the officer's hand on the gun. For a split second, fear flashed in his eyes, but his pride crushed it. He was a master sergeant. He didn't take orders from a kid. Don't you threaten me, Frank roared. He reached for the door handle. I'm going to teach you some respect, you little... Dad, stop, I screamed. Sir, remain in the vehicle, Tyler shouted, drawing his weapon halfway out of the holster. Step out of the vehicle, now. The situation had spiraled. In seconds, we had gone from a routine check to a potential hostile incident. The K-9 unit behind Tyler stepped forward, the German Shepherd barking ferociously, straining against the leash. Other MPs were running out of the shack, hands on their weapons. Frank froze, his hand on the latch. He stared at the gun. He stared at the dog. The reality of the modern world crashed into his delusion. This wasn't the old Corps. This wasn't a handshake deal. He was seconds away from being dragged out of the car, face down on the pavement, in handcuffs. He looked at me, his eyes wide with panic and confusion. He had lost control. Completely. I couldn't let him get arrested. Not like this. Not on Mike's retirement day. I unclenched my hands from the wheel. The trembling stopped. A cold, icy calm washed over me, the same calm I felt in the SIF when the threat level spiked to red. Stay in the car, Frank, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it was steel. I turned to the window. I looked directly at Sergeant Tyler, ignoring the gun, ignoring the shouting. I needed to end this, now. Frank, sit down. My voice cracked through the chaotic air inside the SUV like a whip. It wasn't the voice of a daughter pleading with her father. It was the voice of a major who had commanded operations rooms during national crises. It was guttural, authoritative, and terrifyingly loud. Frank froze. His hand was halfway to the door handle, his mouth open to shout another insult at the MP. He blinked, stunned into silence by the sudden ferocity coming from the driver's seat. He looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw genuine shock in his eyes. I didn't look at him. My eyes were locked on Sergeant Tyler, whose hand was now firmly gripping the butt of his pistol. I hit the button to lower my window completely. The glass slid down with a smooth hum. "Sergeant," I said. My tone was icy calm, a sharp contrast to the shouting match that had just occurred. "Eyes on me." Sergeant Tyler hesitated. His training told him to focus on the threat, the angry old man trying to exit the vehicle. But the authority in my voice pulled his attention. He looked past Frank, meeting my gaze. I didn't offer an explanation. I didn't apologize for my father's behavior. I didn't beg. Instead, I reached into the center console and pulled out my wallet. I flipped it open and slid out my CAC, my common access card. It wasn't the standard white card that every service member carried. This one had a distinct gold chip embedded in the front and a specific barcode on the back that only a handful of people in the DoD possessed. I held it out the window, pinching it between two fingers like a blade. "Run it," I commanded. Tyler looked at the card, then back at Frank, then back at me. He was still pumped full of adrenaline, his chest heaving. He clearly thought I was just another entitled civilian trying to bluff my way onto base. "Ma'am, I need everyone out of the—" I said, "Run the card, Sergeant," I interrupted, my voice dropping an octave. "Check the D-bids scanner, right now." Something in my demeanor, the absolute lack of fear, made him pause. He signaled to his partner with the dog to hold position. Warily, he stepped forward and snatched the card from my hand. He looked at it skeptically. Then, he raised his handheld scanner, the Defense Biometric Identification System device that looked like a rugged smartphone. He aimed the red laser at the barcode on the back of my card. Beep. The sound was sharp in the humid morning air. I watched Tyler's face. I watched for the moment the data hit the screen. Usually the scanner gives a short, cheerful chirp and flashes green for access granted, or a dull buzz and red for denied. This time, the machine did neither. It let out a long, piercing, high-pitched tone that I knew very well. Breep! The LED light on top of the scanner didn't flash green. It strobed rapidly between red and blue. Tyler frowned, thinking the machine had malfunctioned. He looked down at the screen, and then his jaw dropped. I knew exactly what he was seeing. In bold capital letters, scrolling across the backlit display, Major Lily Kemp, USMC, Active Duty Security Clearance, Yankee White, Category. I Access Level Priority 1, Presidential Support Duty. Yankee White isn't just a clearance, it's the Holy Grail. It means I've been vetted by the FBI and the Secret Service to stand within arm's reach of the President of the United States. It means I carry secrets that could topple governments. It means that on any military installation in the world, I am not just an officer, I am a VIP. Sergeant Tyler stared at the screen for a full 3 seconds, his brain trying to reconcile the angry man in the passenger seat with the ghostly high-level clearance holder in the driver's seat. He swallowed hard. The color drained from his face, leaving him pale beneath his tan. He looked up at me. The suspicion was gone. The aggression was gone, replaced by pure, unadulterated terror. He snapped to attention so fast his heels clicked together with an audible crack on the pavement. His hand flew from his weapon to his brow in a perfect, rigid salute. "Ma'am!" he shouted, his voice cracking. "My apologies, Major Kemp. I wasn't aware." He fumbled to hand the card back to me with both hands, treating it like a sacred relic. "We have a Priority 1 entry," Tyler yelled to the other guards in the shack. "Open the lane. Open the VIP lane. Now, now, now. The sudden shift was jarring. The K9 handler yanked his dog back. The other MPs, who had been ready to swarm the car, lowered their rifles and scrambled to hit the buttons in the guard shack. The heavy steel barrier arm shot up instantly. A yellow light began to flash above the gate, and a siren gave a short whoop whoop to clear the traffic ahead. "Please proceed, Major," Tyler shouted over the noise, still holding his salute. "Drive safely, ma'am." I took the card back, sliding it coolly into my wallet. I nodded at him, a single curt nod of dismissal. "Carry on, Sergeant," I said. I hit the button to roll the window up. The silence that returned to the car was heavier than before. It wasn't the silence of tension anymore. It was the vacuum of shock. I put the SUV into drive and pressed the accelerator. The car surged forward, gliding past the stunned MPs, past the concrete barriers, and onto the smooth pavement of the base. I didn't look at Frank immediately. I kept my eyes on the road, merging into the VIP lane that bypassed the winding traffic. But out of my peripheral vision, I could see him. He was slumped against the passenger door. His mouth was hanging open, slack-jawed. His eyes were wide, darting from the rearview mirror, where the MPs were still standing at attention, to my face, and then down to my purse where the card now lay hidden. The bluster was gone. The Master Sergeant persona had evaporated. "What?" he croaked, his voice barely a whisper. He cleared his throat and tried again, sounding smaller than I'd ever heard him. "What the hell was that?" He looked at me as if I had just grown a second head. He had spent my entire life telling me I was nothing, a paper pusher, a fake soldier, a civilian in costume. And in less than 10 seconds, a single piece of plastic from my wallet had commanded more respect from those real Marines than his entire 22-year career. I adjusted the rearview mirror. A small, cold smile touched my lips. "That, Dad," I said softly, "is what a real officer looks like." I drove on, leaving his shattered ego in the dust behind us. The silence inside the SUV was absolute. It wasn't the angry, simmering silence of the drive up here. This was different. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a paradigm shift. The kind of quiet that follows an explosion when the dust is still settling and you're checking to see if you still have all your limbs. We glided down the main avenue of Marine Corps Base Quantico. The VIP lane was smooth, devoid of the potholes and traffic that clogged the civilian access roads. Outside the tinted windows, the base hummed with activity. We passed a platoon of young recruits marching in formation, their boots striking the pavement in perfect unison. As my car approached, the corporal leading them barked a command. "Eyes! Right!" The entire platoon turned their heads toward my vehicle. The corporal snapped a salute. They weren't saluting me personally, they couldn't see through the tint. They were saluting the blue officer's decal on my windshield and the red plates on my bumper. They were saluting the authority I represented. Frank saw it. He flinched, his hand gripping the passenger door handle so tight his knuckles turned white. For decades, he had been the one barking orders. He had been the one demanding respect. Now, he was a passenger in a world that recognized me as royalty and him as baggage. He shifted in his seat, the leather creaking loudly. He cleared his throat, but no sound came out. He tried again. "Lily?" His voice was unrecognizable. It was hoarse, stripped of all its bluster and bravado. It sounded small, scared. "Yes, Dad," I answered, keeping my eyes fixed on the road ahead. We were passing the hangars of HMX-1 now, where the President's helicopters, Marine One, were maintained. The sight usually filled me with pride. Today, it felt like a weapon I had just fired. "That thing—" Frank gestured vaguely with a trembling hand back toward the gate. "That card. That Yankee white thing. What the hell is that?" He didn't sneer. He didn't mock. He asked the question like a child asking why the sky is blue, with genuine, terrified confusion. He couldn't reconcile the daughter he thought pushed papers with the woman who made military police officers tremble. I slowed the car slightly, letting the question hang in the air for a moment. "It's a single-scope background investigation clearance," I said. My voice was calm, factual, devoid of emotion. Category 1, Priority Access. But that kid, Frank stammered. He looked like he saw a ghost. Why did he salute you like that? You're just a major. There are plenty of majors on this base. It's not about the rank, Dad, I said. It's about the access. I turned the car onto the road leading toward the officers' club, but I didn't speed up. I wanted him to hear this. Every word. Yankee White means that the FBI and the Department of Defense have vetted my life back to the day I was born, I explained. They interviewed my kindergarten teachers. They checked every bank account, every email, every phone call I've ever made. They vetted you, Mom, the neighbors, everyone. Frank stared at me, his mouth slightly agape. Why? He whispered. Because I don't fetch coffee, Dad, I said, finally letting a hint of steel enter my voice. I work in presidential support duty. I manage the logistical security for the executive branch. When the president travels, I am one of the people who decides which route is safe. I know the evacuation protocols for the White House. I know where the nuclear football goes if there's an attack. I glanced over at him. He looked pale, as if the blood had drained from his face to his feet. You said I was a secretary, I continued, relentless. You said I never held a real gun. You're right. I don't carry a rifle. I carry the authority to shut down this entire base with a phone call. I carry the responsibility of keeping the commander-in-chief alive. Frank shrank back into his seat. He looked out the window at the green hangars of HMX-1 passing by. The massive Sea King helicopters sat on the tarmac, gleaming in the sun. He knew what those machines were. He knew they represented the pinnacle of Marine Corps aviation. And he was realizing for the first time that his daughter walked among them not as a tourist, but as a commander. I didn't know, he mumbled. You never told me. I tried, I said. For 10 years, I tried. But every time I opened my mouth, you told me to shut up. You told me my awards were paper. You told me I was playing dress-up. I pulled the car to a stop at a red light. The silence returned, but this time it was filled with the sound of illusions shattering. I turned my head and looked him full in the face. The man who had terrorized my self-esteem for 3 decades suddenly looked frail. Old. His Old Corps t-shirt looked faded and sad next to the crisp reality of the active duty base. You called me a civilian back there, I said softly. Frank winced. Look around this car, Dad, I said. Look at where we are. You have an expired ID and a mouth that almost got you arrested. I have the keys to the kingdom. I leaned in closer, making sure he couldn't look away. In this car, I said, you are the only civilian. If it wasn't for me, you wouldn't be going to a party right now. You'd be sitting in a holding cell at the provost marshal's office, waiting for them to process you for trespassing and disorderly conduct. Frank looked down at his hands, those calloused, grease-stained hands that he was so proud of. He rubbed them together nervously. He looked at his boots, still muddy, resting on the floor mat. He looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw the realization hit him like a physical blow. He wasn't the big dog anymore. He wasn't the gatekeeper of what it meant to be a Marine. He was a guest who had behaved very, very badly. He started, but his voice failed him. The light turned green. I didn't wait for him to finish. I eased the car forward, driving toward the river, away from the party, away from the noise. We weren't done yet. The truth had been told, but the wound was still open. And before we could celebrate anything, we had to stop the bleeding. I didn't drive to the officers' club. I couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I turned off the main road and pulled into a deserted gravel overlook near the edge of the base. Through the windshield, the Potomac River flowed sluggishly, its gray waters reflecting the overcast sky. It was quiet here. Just the sound of the wind in the trees and the ticking of the cooling engine as I turned the key and killed the ignition. I unbuckled my seatbelt and turned in my seat to face him. Frank was staring at his knees. His shoulders, usually squared and tense with aggression, were slumped forward. He looked deflated, like a balloon that had finally lost its air. Why, Dad? I asked. My voice wasn't angry anymore. It was just tired, broken. He didn't answer. He just picked at a loose thread on his khaki pants. Why did you always have to make me feel small? I pressed, the words tumbling out faster now. fueled by 10 years of suppressed hurt. Why was nothing ever good enough? I graduated top of my class. I got promoted early. I handle national security. And every single time, you looked at me like I was a mistake, like I was a joke. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, hot and stinging. What did I do wrong? Did I embarrass you? Are you ashamed of me? Frank flinched at the word ashamed. His hands balled into fists on his lap, shaking violently. For a long time, the only sound in the car was my own ragged breathing. I thought he was going to yell again. I thought he was going to tell me to stop whining, to suck it up like a Marine. Then I heard a sound I had never heard in 33 years. A sob. A choked, guttural sound that seemed to be ripped from his throat against his will. Frank Kemp, the man who once told me that crying was for civilians and babies, was weeping. He covered his face with his rough, grease-stained hands. His whole body shook with the force of it. I wasn't ashamed of you, Lily, he gasped, his voice muffled by his palms. I was ashamed of me. I sat frozen, stunned into silence. He lowered his hands. His face was wet, his eyes red and swollen. He looked at me with a vulnerability that was terrifying to witness. That day, he whispered, his voice trembling. Graduation day. When I saw you standing there in that officer's uniform, you looked so tall, so powerful. And I looked at myself, and all I saw was an old man with bad knees and a pension that barely covers the rent. I saw a grunt who fixes trucks. He wiped his nose with the back of his hand, sniffing loudly. You were smart. You were going places I could never go. You were giving orders to men like me. And I got scared. Scared? I asked softly. Scared of what? Scared that you would look down on me, he confessed, the words pouring out now like a dam breaking. Scared that you would realize your old man wasn't a hero, just a mechanic. I thought, if I pushed you down, if I reminded you that I was the real soldier, maybe I could keep you on my level. Maybe I could keep being the dad. The one in charge. He looked out at the river, shame written in every line of his weathered face. It was jealousy, Lily. Pure, ugly jealousy. I was jealous of my own little girl. And because I was weak, I tried to break you to make myself feel strong. He turned back to me, tears streaming freely now. I'm a terrible father. I know that. I've been a terrible father for a long time. The confession hung in the air, raw and painful. But it was also cleansing. It was the truth I had been starving for. He didn't hate me. He didn't think I was incompetent. He had been fighting a war against his own insecurity, and I had been collateral damage. My heart, which had been hardened by years of resentment, began to soften. I looked at this man, this flawed, broken, proud old man, and I didn't see a monster anymore. I saw a person who was hurting. I remembered the verse from Colossians that I had read so many times. Bear with each other and forgive one another if any of you has a grievance against someone. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. Forgiveness isn't about excusing the behavior. It's about releasing the poison so it doesn't kill you both. I reached across the console. I took his hand, that rough, calloused hand that had fixed trucks, built fences, and yes, pushed me away. Dad, I said gently. He looked at our joined hands, surprised by the contact. I don't need you to be a general, I said, squeezing his hand. I don't care about your rank. I don't care if you fix trucks or fly jets. I just needed you to be my dad. I just needed you to tell me I did good. Frank looked up at me, his lip quivering. You did good, Lily. You did damn good. You're incredible. And Dad, I continued, looking him straight in the eye. All that discipline, the grit, the reason I can stand in a room full of generals and hold my ground, I learned that from you. You taught me how to be tough. You gave me the tools to get that clearance. A flicker of light returned to his eyes, a tiny spark of pride. I did. Yes, I nodded. You did. So don't tell me you're useless. You built the foundation. He let out a long, shaky breath. He squeezed my hand back, hard. I'm sorry, baby girl, he whispered, using the nickname he hadn't used since I was 10. I am so sorry. I know, Dad, I said. I forgive you. We sat there for a long time, holding hands in the quiet car by the river. The anger was gone. The need to prove myself was gone. In its place was something quieter, but infinitely stronger. Peace. Finally, Frank sniffed and pulled a handkerchief from his pocket to wipe his face. He blew his nose loudly, a honking sound that made me smile despite myself. Well, he said, his voice gruff but cleared of the bitterness. Old Mike is probably wondering where the hell we are. Can't let the gunnery sergeant drink all the beer without me. I chuckled. No, we can't have that. I started the engine. The car purred to life. Dad? Yeah? When we get there, I'll introduce you to the colonel. I think he'd like to meet the man who taught me how to shoot. Frank straightened his collar. He adjusted his VFW cap, pulling it down to hide his red eyes. He sat up a little taller in the seat. Yeah, he said, a genuine smile touching his lips for the first time in years. I'd like that. I put the car in reverse and backed out of the gravel lot. We headed back toward the officers' club, not as adversaries, but as allies. The war was over, and for the first time, we were both on the winning side. 20 years. They say time flies when you're having fun, but in the Corps, time moves differently. It moves in deployment cycles, in duty stations, in the gray hairs that slowly replace the brown ones. It moves in the lines etched around your eyes from squinting into the sun in foreign deserts, and in the quiet moments between storms. I stood on the raised podium inside Hangar 3 at Quantico. The massive bay doors were open, revealing a square of brilliant Virginia blue sky. Behind me, an American flag the size of a tennis court hung from the rafters, its stars and stripes motionless in the still air. I looked down at my uniform. It wasn't the same one I wore that day at the Waffle House. The gold oak leaves of a major were long gone. In their place, resting heavily on my shoulders, were the silver eagles of a colonel. An 06. 32 years. That was the tally today. 32 years of service, sacrifice, and survival. Today was the end of the line. My retirement ceremony. The hangar was packed. There were generals in the front row, senators, and young Marines who weren't even born when I commissioned. The Marine Corps band was playing a low, stirring rendition of Auld Lang Syne. But my eyes skipped over the brass and the dignitaries. I was looking for the only guest who truly mattered. There, in the front row, parked slightly to the side to accommodate the aisle, was a wheelchair. Sitting in it was Frank Kemp. He was 80 years old now. Time had shrunk him, carving deep valleys into his face and thinning his hair to white wisps. His hands, those massive, grease-stained hands that used to terrify me, shook with a constant rhythmic tremor. A blanket was tucked over his knees, but he was wearing his dress blues, or rather a suit with his miniature medals pinned proudly to the lapel. He insisted on wearing them. He wanted everyone to know he was part of the tribe. His eyes, however, hadn't aged. They were bright, blue, and locked on me with an intensity that burned. But it wasn't the cold fire of judgment anymore. It was the warm glow of unadulterated pride. Next to him sat a young woman with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She wore the uniform of a Marine Corps captain. Elena, my daughter. She had graduated from the Naval Academy 3 years ago. When she told us she wanted to join, Frank had cried. Not because he thought women belonged in the kitchen. Those days were long dead and buried. But because he knew the burden she was choosing to carry. I walked to the microphone. The sound of my boots on the wooden stage echoed through the silent hangar. I adjusted the stand, took a deep breath, and looked out at the sea of faces. I went through the standard thank yous. I thanked the commandant, my staff, the brave men and women I'd led. But then I went off script. I looked down at the front row. They say that a soldier's first weapon is their rifle, I said, my voice echoing through the speakers. But a soldier's first teacher is their father. Frank's head perked up. The tremor in his hand seemed to pause for a second. I want to recognize Master Sergeant Frank Kemp, I continued. Many of you know him as a hero of the 1st Division. I know him as the man who taught me the most important lesson of command. It took us a while to get there. We had to drive through some rough terrain to find it. A few chuckles rippled through the crowd from the people who knew our history. He taught me that true strength isn't about how loud you can yell or how much rank you have on your collar. It's not about putting people down to make yourself feel tall. True strength is about lifting others up until they stand taller than you ever could. I paused, fighting the lump in my throat. Dad, I said directly to him, thank you for learning how to see me. Thank you for being my wingman for the last 20 years. I wouldn't be standing here wearing these eagles if you hadn't shown me how to fly. The hangar erupted in applause. It wasn't polite applause. It was a thunderous, standing ovation. I saw Frank cover his face with his shaking hands, just like he had in the car by the river all those years ago. But this time, Elena was there, her arm around his shoulder, whispering in his ear. He nodded, wiping his eyes with a handkerchief, and gave me a thumbs up. The ceremony moved to its conclusion, the passing of the flag. The sergeant major brought the folded American flag to me, the symbol of a career finished with honor. I held it to my chest, feeling the texture of the fabric, the weight of the history it held. Colonel, United States Marine Corps, retired. Departing, the announcer's voice boomed. As the band struck up the Marines' hymn, the crowd stood. I walked down the steps of the podium. I didn't walk toward the exit. I walked straight to the wheelchair. Frank saw me coming. He started to shift. He gripped the armrests of his chair, his knuckles turning white. Elena moved to help him, but he waved her off. No, I heard him wheeze. I got it. The music seemed to fade into the background. All eyes were on the old man in the front row. With a grunt of supreme effort, fighting against gravity and age and failing muscles, Frank pushed himself up. His legs wobbled. His back was bent. But he stood. He stood on his own 2 feet, facing his superior officer, facing his daughter. He took a breath, steadied himself, and slowly raised his right hand. It wasn't the snap-crisp salute of a 20-year-old drill instructor. It was slow, trembling, and crooked. But it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. It was a salute of absolute respect. It was an acknowledgement of my rank, my service, and my personhood. It was a father telling his child, without a single word, I see you. You are enough. I felt the tears finally spill over, hot tracks running down my face. I snapped my heels together. I raised my hand and returned the salute, holding it, locking eyes with him. Semper Fi, Dad, I whispered. Semper Fi, Colonel, he whispered back, his voice thick with emotion. He held the salute until I dropped mine. Then, exhausted but triumphant, he sank back into his chair, a smile on his face that could have lit up the darkest skiff in the Pentagon. I looked at Elena. She was beaming, tears in her own eyes. Ready to go home, Mom? She asked. I looked around the hangar one last time. I looked at the flag. I looked at the eagles on my shoulder that I would take off tonight for the last time. Then I looked at Frank, the man who had almost broken me, but who had ended up helping to build me back stronger. Yeah, I said, resting my hand on his shoulder. Let's go home. Mission accomplished. Thank you for taking this journey with me. I know many of you are fighting your own battles right now. Maybe in a diner booth or in a car with someone who refuses to see your worth. Remember, their inability to see your value does not decrease it. You define your own rank. If my story gave you strength today, please support this channel by hitting the like button and subscribing. It helps us share more stories of resilience. And if you are ready to stand tall in your own life, type "Mission accomplished" in the comments below. Dismissed.